Hello and welcome to the lobby of the Sunshine Cottage. My name's Edward Halperin. I'm the Chancellor and Chief Executive Officer of New York Medical College. I'm also a pediatric radiation oncologist. I take care of children with cancer who need radiation therapy. I'm going to spend a few minutes and tell you about the Sunshine Cottage and some of the images on the walls around you. You're seated in the lobby of the Sunshine Cottage. The name, the Sunshine Cottage, and the name of the street, Sunshine Cottage Road, are because that was the standard therapy for tuberculosis, fresh air and sunshine. And this building was a children's tuberculosis sanatorium. You can tell it was a children's tuberculosis sanatorium if you look carefully at some of the things you passed on the way into the building. Did you notice that there are animal images in the wrought iron fence, turkeys and turtles? There are animal images over the windows, owls. There's a rising sun on the pediment of the building up on top. And right over the door, there's a rabbit from Alice in Wonderland. And you can even see his whiskers that were made out of metal rods. All these images were at one time covered over, but we've liberated them. They're all easy to see now because we know that in 1931, when this building was built, the architect was trying to show that when people get sick, you have to treat not only their disease, but their spirit. And the architect was trying to raise the spirit of sick children with tuberculosis. And that idea, that you treat not only the disease, but also the spirit, is an idea we cherish at New York Medical College, and we think it's an important lesson now and for the future. The first image we'll chat about is that of William Cullen Bryant. He was the first president of New York Medical College. He was not a physician. He was a lawyer and a poet, and he made his livelihood as the editor of the New York Post newspaper, which you can see next to his right elbow in the painting. Perhaps some of you had to memorize his poems like Thanatopsis in English class in high school. William Cullen Bryant thought that the mainstream medicine of the pre-Civil War era in the United States was crazy. He didn't understand bleeding, purging, vomiting. It made no sense to him. What did make sense to him was therapy of fresh air, sunshine, diet, and infinite dilutions of drugs, what was called at that time homeopathy, after the teachings of the German physician Samuel Hahnemann. And so he agitated before the New York State Legislature and used the editorial pages of the New York Post to create the New York Homeopathic Medical College in 1860, and he became its first president. And 3 years later, the Homeopathic Medical College for Women. Those are our predecessors at New York Medical College. William Cullen Bryant School was founded at 20th Street and 3rd Avenue in Manhattan, and it remained in Manhattan from 1860 until the 1970s. William Cullen Bryant was friendly with all the greats of the literary and artistic community of New York. You can see the esteem with which he was held by his fellow New Yorkers by the fact that the large park behind the 42nd Street Library in Manhattan is called Bryant Park in his honor. Among his acquaintances was Arthur Parton, the painter of this classical Hudson River landscape painting hanging in the Sunshine Cottage. Hudson River landscape painting classically shows nature raw in the teeth. The painting looks as if the boulders are going to roll out of the Hudson River into your lap as you look at the painting. And typically there are no signs of human intervention, unlike British landscape painting, where you might see a cow or a fence or a farmhouse or a smokestack. You don't see any human intervention in Hudson River landscape painting, except in our painting, where if you look really closely, you'll see a fly fisherman standing on the rocks. Also in the Sunshine Cottage, you can see the extraordinary autograph collection of Professor Ernst Winder. Winder, as a medical student, was interested in the etiology of lung cancer. Working with his mentor, Professor Ewart Graham, he did what was considered extraordinary at its time, a case-control study analyzing whether, if a person did or did not smoke, and interestingly, how much they smoked and for how long, did that correlate with the risk of lung cancer. He found that it did. His paper was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 1950, and Winder went on to an illustrious career as a cancer epidemiologist. You can see our photograph of Professor Winder standing next to the late Senator from Massachusetts, Edward Kennedy. In his autograph collection, you see handwritten letters by Albert Sabin for the Sabin polio vaccine. John Enders, the winner of the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1954 for his discovery of growing polio in culture. Professor Cowdery, for whom the Cowdery bodies are named, indicative of herpes infection of cells. There is an autograph of Emil Ludwig von Behring. This is from 1899. In 1901, Behring won the first Nobel Prize in Medicine or Physiology ever awarded for his work on diphtheria antitoxin. And the crowning piece of the collection, a letter from 1935 from Albert Einstein. You can see Einstein's signature quite clearly on the letter, written to a philosophy professor in Switzerland, discussing whether the professor will get a grant from the Rockefeller brothers. This old postcard is from 1879. It was written by hand from Down in England and sent to Berlin in Germany. The author of the postcard says, "I'm really busy now. I have a lot to do. I'm trying to finish up the new book. I know it's being translated into German and the translator is working pretty slowly, but don't worry, it'll be ready for publication at the time of the book fair this fall. Sorry I have to be brief, I have a lot to do." The author is Charles Darwin. He's writing to his German collaborator about the new biography of his father, Erasmus Darwin, a biologist. And this postcard has been confirmed by the Darwin Letters Project at Cambridge University as a previously unknown piece of Darwin correspondence, handwritten by England's greatest biologist. And you can see it hanging on the wall of the Sunshine Cottage, framed so you can see both the front and the back, as Darwin both addressed the postcard himself and wrote it all out by hand. Another of the treasures of New York Medical College. Also here in the Sunshine Cottage is an extraordinarily large portrait of Governor Roswell Pettibone Flower. He was a Democrat. He was a member of the House of Representatives. He was a political ally of Grover Cleveland, who was governor of New York and then elected president of the United States. Flower himself goes from being a member of the House of Representatives in the U.S. Congress to being governor of New York. And he builds a hospital in Manhattan named after him and his family, the Flower Hospital, which eventually merges with the Fifth Avenue Hospital and was for many years one of the principal teaching hospitals of the New York Medical College, the Flower and Fifth Avenue Hospital. In fact, for some years this college was actually called, and here's an extraordinarily long name, the New York Medical College and the Flower and Fifth Avenue Hospitals. And some of the older New Yorkers still refer to this school as the Flower Fifth Avenue Medical School. We also have on display a series of images which show what the college looked like from its founding in Manhattan in 1860 as it worked its way uptown in Manhattan until the construction of the Flower Fifth Avenue Hospital on Central Park East. We have images of Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia in 1938 laying the cornerstone of the medical college and the hospital. You can see in this image how the cornerstone begins in 1860 up to that time, 1938. If one were to look only at the portraits and the photographs that we've talked about so far, you could come away with the impression of a college with no interest in diversity and not interest in social responsibility. Quite the opposite is the case. This college has been a bastion against bigotry in medical education since its founding. This college has a long and powerful tradition that we take care of all patients who make their ways to our doors. We don't ask if you're a citizen. We don't ask if you speak English. We don't ask if you have insurance. If you come to the hospitals and the faculty of the New York Medical College, you will be taken care of. The next several images highlight this very important part of our history. For example, the first female physician in Canadian history did not graduate from the medical schools at the University of Toronto or McGill or the University of British Columbia or the University of Western Ontario. She graduated from the New York Medical College in 1867. She was honored by a Canadian postage stamp, not only for being the first Canadian female physician, but for being a Canadian suffragette. The first African-American female physician in the history of the state of New York graduated from New York Medical College in 1870. Our first African-American male graduate was in 1888. The first white majority medical school in the history of the United States to have an African-American dean was New York Medical College in the 1950s, and he was a she. The first white majority medical school to have scholarships designated for African Americans was New York Medical College in 1928, started by Dr. Crump, a surgeon whose parents were personal friends of John Brown and Frederick Douglass, and who ran the Underground Railroad station for escaping slaves in Rochester, New York. And when most of the medical schools in the United States had anti-Semitic and anti-Roman Catholic admissions quotas, of the 80 medical schools in the United States, 10 did not, and one of them was the New York Medical College. In fact, the singular medical school, which most egregiously ignored the anti-Semitic admissions quotas prevalent in the United States in medical education from World War I until the 1960s, was New York Medical College. This college has a wonderful past, an honorable present, and an exciting future ahead of us. Great things are happening here, and we look forward to you being part of it. Thank you for visiting with us at New York Medical College. We hope you have a pleasant day.